Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Dorm Next Door podcast, episode 6. Merry Christmas. I don't care if I'm recording this at the beginning of November. Merry Christmas to all of you guys. I'm just ready for that season to start. So I'm in the mood. I'm not too fanatic about Halloween, so I'm just super excited. But it has been a crazy week in our country, mostly negative, but you have to see past that. And it's always good to take opportunities, especially when you lose elections, depending on what party you support. If you've listened to this podcast before, you'd know that this is largely a conservative well, it's entirely a conservative podcast, and sometimes it's a little bit more conservative than people are aware of. But sometimes in these situations, you can say, what went wrong? You should ask what went wrong, because obviously something went wrong. So I don't think that this week should come as a surprise, because these elections were mostly held in Democratic strongholds. Now, I know Virginia was won by Glenn Youngkin 4 years ago. However, that was in some ways an anomaly. You had a very unpopular candidate that had just been the prior governor before the incumbent that was coming back. And Glenn Youngkin ran a very masterful campaign in a country that was largely disenfranchised from the Biden administration. Now, you see that Winsome Earl Sears lost the election. I don't think this should come as a surprise. But she lost because the temperature in our country doesn't leave Republicans too excited to vote. It really doesn't. Now, New Jersey was close. That says something, because most of the time that is Democratic safe for presidential elections, Senate election, congressional elections, or whatever. But the governor election was lost. And I think that these things should not come as a surprise. It doesn't matter who is running, but the temperature of our country was taken. Now, the elephant in the room is that because of these things, because Republican establishment has distance itself from the values and the core values and the beliefs of the people that voted for them, they opened the door for, in the most liberal areas in our country, for people like Zohran Mamdani to get elected, who is a Muslim, full blown. That should come as a shock. My opinion is this: the United States of America is a Christian nation. It's not a Muslim nation. It's nothing else. It's not an atheist nation, no matter how hard they try and make it one. So we shouldn't welcome that aspect of it. We should understand, yes, a Democrat's going to win in whichever else state, but there's a fat difference between the Democrats that get elected everywhere else in the country and the Democrat that just got elected in New York City. So that's kind of the thing, is you can break it up in different ways. But many things have happened this week, and you can take it from any different angle. But all I would say is Republicans are the reason that they lost these races, or at least didn't help. You shouldn't have necessarily expected to win all of these, right? But we shouldn't have expected to perform and see a jolt to the right like we did during the 2024 election. And I know I'm literally his biggest op if you've been listening to the podcast, but I blame Republicans like Lindsey Graham. I blame Republicans like Ted Cruz. You know what? In 2021, when he was Trump's biggest supporter, it seemed, I was a huge Ted Cruz fan. I loved Ted Cruz. But you know what? Now I realize it's Republicans like that are the problem. There's a growing faction of the Republican Party, of the conservative movement, that wants to actually put our country first. And when you see Tucker Carlson have somebody like Nick Fuentes on their podcast, and they actually want to talk about these things, and they actually want to provide Nick a platform to talk about what he really believes, rather than just the clips that they put on the internet, then this spells absolute trouble, because these beliefs are actually very popular among people like myself, right? So the same talking points, the same blind support for Israel, the same blind support for free trade, even though that's a more complex issue, the same blind support for the Trump administration, beyond whether or not this is a belief that beyond whether or not this is a call that Trump would have made in the past. But if it comes from the Trump administration, we shouldn't question it. These are the things that we need to run away from. Because, you know what, as much as I love Trump, a lot of what's happening isn't what Trump actually wants. Not a lot of what Trump actually stands for is making it through, and you can thank the people around him for that. The swamp is the Republican establishment that's not going away. It's the Republican establishment that tries to act like they are the moral authority. They're the ones that act like they have the moral high ground in all situations as it relates to politics. I have watched as Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin. I used to love Mark Levin on Fox News. I've watched as they have literally tried to censor and they want to get rid of. This is what they've said. They want, specifically Mark Levin. The dude is after everybody. They have been actively trying to silence people that disagree with them on the right and act like it's their party. It's not. The Republican Party is not the party of foreign interests. Ben Shapiro has said several times that the only reason that he supports the nation that he lives in, the United States of America, is because of its support for Israel, and Israel is a backdrop if this country should not go in the direction that he hopes. And if something should happen, he's going to fall back on Israel. In the Republican Party specifically the conservative movement as well, we cannot have people that do not want to conserve American values. I'm sorry, you do not want to conserve anything that has to do with America if you are busy supporting Israel. We have so many of our politicians have dual citizenship in both countries. It's a huge problem. And when you have Tucker Carlson and wants to speak about these issues that Republican voters are going to relate to, we shouldn't silence that. This is going to create a civil war within our party. And they'll say, oh, we got to agree. We got to agree. Well, when most people right now are calling for unity in the Republican Party, what they actually mean is they want the side that supports putting our country first to shut up. And they want us to stick to the status quo of the voices of Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin and Lindsey Graham and whomever else, because that's the safe bet. Well, we cannot play it safe if we want to keep our country in 2028, because let me tell you, the left only goes further left. This is the truth. We just elected a communist. He wants centralized control of private institutions. He wants the government of New York to have a lot more power than it does today, even though it is the second most powerful executive position in the country. But let me tell you, if we have the hard conversations right now in the Republican Party, if we embrace God instead of Judeo-Christian values, if we embrace the values of the Bible, if we embrace the values of Christ, we will see turnout like never before, and it'll take a couple of years. 2025 is a good year to have things go wrong. After the 2024 election, you have a couple of years to figure out what you can do better, how our country is changing, and our country is changing rapidly, more rapidly than I think it did in the past 10 years, at any phase that we went through. Demographics are shifting very, very fast, and you have the demographic of young men, specifically 18 to 29, that are very, very conservative. They're not falling for the same lies again, and I know I've said that many, many times. But we need to, in the primaries, get a lot of these voters out. Tucker Carlson doesn't want Lindsey Graham to stand. I say his name a lot because he is the face of this. He's 71 years old. What does he know about the best interest for the younger part of this country? In the past 40 years, wages have largely stayed stagnant while rent prices have skyrocketed. And so, you know what young people eventually do when they get ignored enough? They say, okay, let me give communism a try. And so often when you give communism a try, if you go far enough, you can't go back, even when you realize you made a fat mistake. It's government that needs to care about people. I don't think it's going to be the Democratic Party, but when Republicans fail, the voters in the middle go to the Democratic Party and vice versa. We saw a fat jump to the Republican Party in 99% of counties across the United States in 2024 because they wanted Trump to deliver on the promises that he said he was going to. They want mass deportations. They want to make America healthy again. And that means banning things like Red 40, which is good, but they want to go a little bit further than that. We want absolute transparency on these issues. We want the border wall to be completely built. But you know what we also want at this point? We want no more foreign aid going overseas because we know how big of a problem we have in the United States. Domestically, the opioid crisis is crazy. California, my home state, has half of the unsheltered homeless in the country. We have a nation that is crumbling. A country is pretty much outside of rural areas. People that come to the United States or know of the United States or live in the United States most likely know it by its cities. And if you go into the cities and if you go into a place like Los Angeles, New York City, wherever, and you're seeing destruction, if you're seeing homelessness, if you're seeing drugs, crime, whatever it is, you are seeing the collapse of the greatest country that has ever been on the face of this planet. That's what we live in, and we're seeing it slip through our fingers. We need to employ candidates that have youth. That's hard to do. We need to employ candidates that love our country. That's hard to do, but we just need to keep pushing on it. We're seeing it. If you go on X, if you go on Instagram, it's hard to avoid these ideas that are finally breaking through the Republican establishment. It's becoming so much more unpopular, even though our entire lives we've been told that we should support other countries with our finance, specifically Israel. It's becoming very, very unpopular. And this is a good sign. This means that there's definitely a light at the end of the tunnel. Now, who are the Democrats going to run in 2028? I don't even think they know. But politics are getting deeper, and the divide is getting way, way, way worse. But I think there's hope. The Republican Party of today, or at least the people that run it, are going to be out of power very, very soon. And this is for better, because this party can be fixed. This party can be fixed. Now, you're seeing in multiple states across the country an effort to gerrymander. And if you don't know what gerrymandering is, every time you redistrict the map of your state, the congressional map, gerrymandering is when the party in power tries to create districts in a way that gives their party an unfair benefit. So California just passed Proposition 50 overwhelmingly by its Democratic Party has a 2/3 dominance over the state right now, and that bill, Prop 50, passed by that same margin. So what's going to happen is I'm going to lose my district that I live in, which currently has a Republican sitting in the seat. So yeah, Texas has done it. Florida's done it. A slew of other Republican states have done it, and it's wrong across the board. Because if you're going to have a representative government, you need to have a congressman that really represents your area. And that's connected to the layout, whether it's urban, whether it's rural, whatever it is, geographically. All these things need to come into play so that we can have representative government on the most local levels, which is where the framers of the Constitution intended for their people to be represented, at the most local levels. So what they're trying to turn my district into right now, my district is one of the most Republican strongholds. It's usually R+10 rural areas in the state. So how are we going to have somebody represent the interests in Congress? How are we going to have somebody represent the interests of the people that I live with, the person that I am, in further east in the state? How are you going to have us be represented along with people all the way near the beach, in the suburbs, in urban areas? It's two different. It's completely different. That's the problem. Is now when you redistrict with the entire purpose of gaining a Democratic seat, from it going from safe red to putting enough Democratic voters in our new district to make it blue, you no longer have a representative government. California, even though it hasn't done it for a long time, California does not care about your vote. It doesn't care to represent you in state or local governments. Gavin Newsom doesn't care about what you think. He never has. Even a year into him being the governor, when he was keeping his entire state in lockdown, he got caught at the French Laundry. No mask, no nothing, and he laughs it off. So now he's making it worse. Nobody's without excuse, but there seems to be a pattern with Gavin. He seems to be the one guy that no matter what, he can't do anything for the good of his state. He doesn't go to bat for our state. I think right now he should be demanding the opening of the federal government for his people beyond party lines. You know what the condition is for Democrats to open our country up again, the federal government, since they won't come to the table? They want to extend the debt $1.5 trillion for health care and other things as such. Can we afford that? Absolutely not. Many states in our country have already passed in the past. They've passed a bill saying that we need to have a balanced budget every single year, and the federal government has yet to do that. They have yet to do that. California doesn't have one. So we can't trust this guy to be fiscally responsible. How can we trust him to represent us at the local levels of our own state? We have to know these things. We have to understand these people. We have to have a memory so that we don't get blown out in 2028 and that we have no hopes for election after that. Because you know what? The easiest thing is to do to make your vote not count anymore, it's to grant amnesty. And I know that's kind of jumping subjects here, but in the early 1980s, Ronald Reagan did just that, and I think it was a fat mistake on his part. He granted an amnesty in, I believe, 1981. And specific to the state of California, you saw a shift in voters. I think this actually could have been in his second term. It might have been 1986. I want you to look this up for yourself. But Ronald Reagan, during his presidency, granted amnesty to millions of illegal immigrants. And in 1988, the state of California went red for the last time. This is what happens. So, assuming a Democrat gets elected in 2028, the 20 million illegals that we still have in our country, that's really hard to get out. It's nearly impossible. J.D. Vance wanted to start by deporting 1 million illegals in 1 year, which I think was a good start, and we haven't seen it. Right? But so if you have 20 million people, by the time it comes for the next election and voters seem disenfranchised by this administration, and I pray they don't, you'll see the election of an even more radical Democrat, and you know what they're going to do? They're going to grant amnesty. And a Republican will never, ever win another election in the federal government again. Specifically the presidency. You will never see another Republican president ever again. This is our last shot. 2024, I believe, was our last shot to really make a difference and to really change things for the better. We need our president to focus more on immigration. It's like we're so distracted we've completely forgot that one of the main thing that this guy got elected for, yeah, you can argue a lot of voters shifted because of the economy, but immigration is a big deal. Is a big, big deal. That's why I started booing really, really loud when he all of a sudden wanted to grant amnesty to farmers. It's probably because the people around him, his advisors, somebody in there gave him that idea and put it in his head. President Trump wants to do the right thing. I 100% believe that. Since 2015 when he came down the escalator till today, he wants to do the right thing. But in your presidency, executive power throughout the history of humanity, whoever's in power, whether an emperor and they have all the power in the world, or they are a prime minister and they have far less, they are always a victim to the advisors that they have around them. And the people that Trump has around him are the wrong people. Kash Patel, the FBI director, was a Trojan horse. We thought that this guy, after he went on Joe Rogan and he talked about all the things that he was going to do, all of the reforms he was going to make in the FBI, and then all of a sudden he's shutting down Joe Kent's efforts to see if there was any foreign interference in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And he shuts it down. And he is using the FBI's private plane so that he can go visit his girlfriend as she sings in Nashville, Tennessee. This is the kind of guy that we have. So all the people, just because they say they're MAGA, just because they support President Trump, just because they're like, let's drain the swamp or let's do this, let's do that, I don't think we can trust them 99% of the time. Because right now in the Republican Party, I think anybody, and I mean anybody, will try and get close to Trump just so they can get his endorsement and just so they can get in power. We saw this in the 2020 election after we saw the two senators in Georgia I'm forgetting their names, but the senators in Georgia during the runoff that was deciding whether or not the Senate was going to be in the control of the Republicans or the Democrats, both got the Trump endorsement, and they both said that they were going to challenge the electoral votes, the electoral count vote on January 6th of 2021 for the president, assuming they won. When they lost, and they both lost to Jon Ossoff and the other guy, when they both lost, they gave up. And I remember specifically the woman that was endorsed by Trump that lost re-election in the Senate. I remember her giving up because, and she disavowed Trump in that moment. You know why? Because she wanted to be in office. She did not care. These people will do anything for Trump's endorsement. The Republican establishment will do anything for Trump's endorsement. They'll do anything except for actually support and actually believe in the values and in the policies that matter to their voters. I think at this point, the MAGA movement doesn't represent what Trump originally wanted, and it doesn't represent what Americans want. We need to see a massive shift, or else we will lose our country indefinitely. And I think New York City has the chance. They get to experience, it's kind of a punishment, they get to experience what it's like to have a communist in office. They get to really dwell in that, and they get to decide whether or not they like it. You know, praise God that they have the choice still, right? They'll still hopefully be able to vote this guy out, but you do it enough times and you don't get to cast another ballot. Because largely, there's one party that dominates New York City. The Republican got like 8% of the vote. And Curtis Sliwa is a stand-up guy. But one-party control is communism at its finest. That is the bellwether for the rest of the country. If it decides to move even further left, we will become like New York City. So we have to pray for New York City. If you're a Christian, and I hope you are, and if you're not, you're still alive, so God still has a plan for you, still has a purpose for you. We must pray for New York City. We must pray that people would have a memory. We must pray that people acknowledge which leaders actually have their best interest in mind. We must pray that people want to put the interests of their country before the interests of other countries. I think I might as well just dedicate a few minutes at the end of every single episode to just talk about the power of prayer. So, you obviously, everybody, if you pray, you definitely pray over your own issues in life. You'll probably pray over the issues of some of your family members, your friends, people that ask to pray for you. And you might even pray for a tragedy that you saw in the country. But will you pray for your country as a whole? Will you pray for the eyes of your politicians? Will you pray for your leaders? Even though Zohran Mamdani got elected, even though Democrats swept the elections on Tuesday, you must realize that biblically, God has everybody in office for a reason. Everybody feeds into God's glory. Everybody feeds into God's plan. Everybody is appointed to that position by God, whether or not they are a good or righteous man or woman or not. That's just the way it is. So we honor it, but we also cherish and we do not take for granted the ability that we have to cast a ballot. That is the one thing you have as a citizen of the United States of America. But you have to start valuing and fighting for that. And fighting for your right to vote at this point looks a heck of a lot more than voting itself. If Christianity does not rise up in our country again, then why do you have a reason to believe in conservative values in the first place? You have no reason to believe that it is good to preserve marriage between a man and a woman. You have no reason to preserve the church in our country. You have no reason to preserve Christian values if you yourself do not have an objective reason to support them yourself. The objective reason why we believe in these values is because of God. Outside of God, there is no such thing as objectivity. Because God being the creator of everything on this earth, God being the creator of moral authority, God being the creator of morals itself, means that morals are an objective thing. Why would you fight for abortion if you do not believe that life is sacred and created by God? So at the root of the conservative movement, Christ has to be the foundation. He has to be the foundation of every good thing in our world. Because if Christ is not the firm foundation that our movement stands on to save our country, it will crumble. Neocons, Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, whomever else, will ruin it. They will proclaim the same ideas that you know you believe in as a Christian, except for they don't really believe in it, and they're going to exploit you and your beliefs as a means to get more votes and stay in office and to stay in power. And from there, we're not going to have any change at all because they don't stand for anything. They don't stand up for our country, and they'll take money from anybody. And from there, we see the decline in our nation, we see the rise of communism, and we see the end of the country that was designed in the 1700s in the greatest revolution that ever took place. Pray for your country. Pray for everybody in it. Pray for everybody in power. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. It may have been shorter, I know, but I felt like it was pretty dense. I have some really cool projects coming up. Another one of those investigative pieces like I released a couple of years ago is going to be coming out pretty soon here. Just saw some information on that, but I like to put effort into things like these. I'm going to be going to Los Angeles this weekend for something pretty cool that I can't necessarily talk about, but it's been an exciting opportunity, and I'm just blessed by God. And I'm praying that I do not make a fool of myself. But anyways, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with a friend. If you don't have any friends, which I think you do, share it with your family. If you find yourself completely alone, go on the corner of a street and hold up a cardboard sign and say, "Listen to the Dorm Next Door podcast, episode 6, out now." Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.